to ASPE for hosting all of us. A few of us have just jumped off the plane from Korea and elsewhere, so we're really, really happy to be here to share this topic with you all. I know during the first session we talked a little bit about what AI is, where it's going, the technology itself. But in this session, I'd love to get our speakers to talk to everyone about what it actually means for the geopolitics of AI. So of course, in AI, we know a lot about the US-China two-horse race. Where are the other countries that are following behind? And then the other countries that are not even close to following behind and what their capabilities are. So I think to get us started, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we will transition into what sort of pathways there are for countries like, for example, Australia. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about our national AI capability plan that's just come out, and what this all looks like for AI adoption as well as risks. So to get us started, one of my favorite people to speak to, Janet, I want to turn to you. And I'd love to hear from you a great sort of state of play as to where things are with AI, who the key players are outside of the US, China. If you want to comment on US, China, feel free to, but where things are at right now.
Great, yeah. Well, I think I have to maybe stage set with a bit of commentary on the US and China, because I think to understand the magnitude of investment, it's really important to understand what is driving this forward. Stanford Human-Centered AI Center did a really good analysis of how much money in the private sector is flooding towards AI across the world. And to put it in perspective, we've got like $109 billion being put in just last year by the US private sector. The next runner-up is China with $9 billion. And below that, I think UK and some others around $4 billion. Australia didn't quite make it onto the map of this analysis. And then if we look forward, we've got even just one company, OpenAI, is looking to spend $1.4 trillion on infrastructure build-out in the next few years. And to put that in the scheme of things, I think that really makes us think, what is the role of other players here? Because we're dealing with a technology where when we're thinking about frontier AI, the most capable models, you're getting real returns to scale. Like more compute, more capability, more experiments, more research leads to better models. And so we've got this sort of flywheel of AI progress being driven by massive amounts of capital. And I think that brings this fundamental question up as to like, what is the role of other players around the globe?
Who are the other players?
Who are the other players? Yeah. So, okay, that's a bit unfair. I think
we've got France, Gulf countries, and I think Korea, which we'll get to later on today as well.
I think where we're seeing really key players emerge is in the compute supply chain, even as far back as energy. So the US is facing real energy bottlenecks. They brought on like between 30 and 40 gigawatts of power last year, in comparison to China, who brought on over 400 gigawatts of power. And 1 gigawatt of power is like 1 nuclear reactor's equivalent, for context. And so with that energy shortage, they're now looking overseas to where they can build out. And that's happening both at the private sector level and in government-to-government engagements. So we've seen countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, who have massive access to sovereign wealth funds, saying, hey, come here, we'll get rid of any regulatory bottleneck in your way, and you can build out at massive scale. There's some limitations to that, and the US is aware of it. Like, technology like AI is incredibly dual use, and we're not sure what capabilities will emerge at the frontier. And so do you really want the largest training runs and the largest deployment of AI to be occurring in authoritarian regimes that are not always aligned with US interests? Now we have the US looking overseas, and this is, I think, a fundamental pivot point for what countries' strategies are. Like, some companies are approaching Australia to say, hey, if you can change some of the regulations in place here, we could build out massively. Like the difference between $10 billion of private sector investment and $100 billion of private sector investment in Australia. And so I think, the Gulf states are chomping at the bit, trying to get a piece of the pie. The US is reluctant to sort of share those spoils with countries that may not be aligned longer term. And I think there's a real opportunity right now for Australia and others to step up and say, you can build here with clean energy, and in return, then you get the geostrategic leverage of what does the future of AI look like and how are the benefits shared.
I love that, Janet. One really interesting factoid I heard a few weeks ago from Fareed Zakaria was actually that the amount of spending relative to GDP in the US on AI is only 10% of what the US had spent on national rail infrastructure back in the day, which is tiny, right? But we often think about it in sort of like sheer quantity and not relative amounts. Tim, I want to turn over to you. Now, you were based in the US. You've been a veteran in this field for a very long time. What what exactly are some avenues for countries that are not the US or China to be doing in terms of joining the AI capability race and ensuring that they are adopting AI into their economy?
Yeah, I mean, this gets a little bit to at least in the context of Australia. I've lived now in the US for 13 years. And so,
how are you doing? You
yeah,
okay?
well, it's been an interesting journey, I can tell you, across a couple of different companies and as an entrepreneur too. But I think the biggest thing is in the United States today, it is a very technology-driven economy, right? You have seven companies, the Magnificent Seven, that take roughly now almost 40% of the S&P 500. Australia really is nowhere near that in terms of its market and its investment. I think the biggest challenge that we've seen in the United States, increasingly with AI, and I spent actually 8 years at Google Brain, is just power. And so, as Janet has already said, at the end of the day, and I think the last speakers also spoke about this, the scaling laws are this set of laws that basically talk about, data, model, and compute size, and the relationship between those things. And as you scale them, it's essentially it's an exponential curve. As you scale it, what you learn is that your model becomes more accurate. And so all the frontier labs, what they're essentially saying today is, hey, look, let's just keep building more compute. Let's keep throwing more data, getting larger models, and those models become more accurate. That's essentially the genesis of what's happening, right? So the challenge then becomes who owns the compute? And that's a function of data center build out. And so you've seen these projects in the United States now. For example, our company works with a lot of the hyperscaler organizations in the United States. You see the Stargate project, which was a collaboration between OpenAI and Oracle, also NVIDIA and AMD. It's a $500 billion project in the United States, right? Now, to put that into magnitude for a second, a 1 gigawatt data center, what does that mean, right? In the United States, they have a nuclear plant in Arizona called the Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant. It's I think it's about almost a 3.9 gigawatt power plant. Each reactor is 1.3 gigawatts, right? And so a gigawatt facility, if you rack and stack that with hardware today, it's about between 300 to 500,000 GPUs. That is roughly what you get. So the current frontier models, if you look on the internet and you see, whether it's Claude, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's Grok, even Gemini, which is slightly different because Google has a different stack, those models are roughly today trained on about 0.3 of a gigawatt, right? So it's about 200,000 GPUs. And that, in the world of AI, that's about e to the 26 flops. So that's how big these models are. Now, to go back to the scaling laws, what it means is to get to the next level, to get to e to the 27, you have to 10x everything. So you go from 200,000 GPUs, now you need to go to 2 million to get to the next level, right? So that goes from 0.3, so you 10x it. So now you need a nuclear power plant level of power to get us to the next scale on the model curve, right? So why is that interesting, right? Why it's interesting is, and I think Janet had just sort of started to say this, in China today, they have 4,000 gigawatts of power available. In the last 2 years, they added 785 gigawatts. In 2 years, 785 gigawatts. In the United States, across that same period, added about 100 gigawatts, 120 gigawatts, to give you a similar comparison. Australia, which is what drives me to a very high level of concern, added about 10 to 15 gigawatts, right? And so, it was interesting on the plane on the way out here, I read the Australian Energy Market Organisation report, and and just to dovetail a little bit to the AI national strategy.
We will get back to that.
We will get back to it, but the government's claiming look, firstly, I applaud the government for putting together a policy. It's 37 pages. I think it's great that there's a centre and centralised and directed approach. It does not go anywhere near as far as what it needs to for sovereign AI and for power particularly. But to say, and my point here is to say, that we are claiming $100 billion worth of investment is flowing into Australia. Why that makes no sense, statistically, is to claim that much, at least according to the energy provider in Australia, you're going to need at least 60 gigawatts of power to power the data centres that are being claimed from both hyperscalers and neoclouds in this country. But if the actual capacity that's estimated to come online is no more than 6 to 10. So what are we doing about it as a country, right? And to get a report that says in the next 5 years, so the last panel just sat on this stage and told you maybe there will be superintelligence in the next 5 years. Personally, I don't agree with it. I can give you a whole different view on that. But we need a Manhattan-style project in this country for energy. That is my belief. And if we don't do something very quickly, I think we have amazing opportunities with superannuation.
Yep.
We can totally change your future, your super. There is $4.3 trillion sitting in these accounts that could be directed to a very large-scale energy build-out for this country and enable us to be part of the AI revolution. Otherwise, we will simply be missed. It is that simple.
I couldn't agree more, Tim, but we will come back to that more and make some actual recommendations for the government
I also don't remember
in a
what
little
question
bit.
was, but I probably answered
Totally
a whole lot
fine.
of those.
we can zoom back out. I want to bring us back to other countries that are in the race, right? Remember, there's this US-China two-horse race, which looks like no one is getting close to, even the sovereign wealth funds in the Gulf states. But I do want to talk to Sunghoon about South Korea and the really ambitious projects that we've got going in South Korea that are looking at ways or avenues that countries can use, whether it's manufacturing, semiconductors, whether it's energy, data centers, as well as developing their own AI apps or AI frontier models. What is South Korea doing here? I know you've been here this week to talk to our government or the Australian government. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing, and secondly, why you think perhaps sovereign AI is or is not important in all of this.
Okay. You guys mentioned about power or energy, and that is also our issue for Korea. Anyway, the Korea is the you mentioned two big horse races.
Yes.
Our country is same issue, same challenge with other small countries, Australia, or compared to the big countries. But as you know, I think we establish the AI ecosystem. We need many factors. For example, the AI technology, AI data, AI networking, and power. So it's a very burden for our country, Korea, to establish this AI ecosystem. But anyway, the AI race is started, and we can. It's very impossible to stop the race. So the main our goal is to how to follow and how go with hand in hand with other countries, whether big country or small countries. So how to address these issues with other countries through the cooperation or any other tools. So our country is in a sense we have strength, and in other sense we have weaknesses. We have some semiconductor company, and we have some AI energy model company, and we have some. We are trying to establishment data center. Mm-hmm. So another issue that you mentioned, the power. The power is we in Korea we have established many nuclear power plants, but considering climate change, the international climate change issues, so we are considering how to address using the other energy power. So there are many issues for Korea, just for in a sense the small countries. But anyway, we in the technology we trying to input very much R&D investment in AI technology. Mm-hmm. And some we support the semiconductor company. We should go with tech company. I mean, in the area of AI technology or AI ecosystem, government can not go only. We should go with a private company. We should cooperate between private and public sector. So we are in the aspect of power. We trying to do R&D semiconductor, which is consume less power than now these days semiconductor. I mean, you mentioned we need more, so much tremendous power to operate AI system. Given that situation, anyway, I think we should try to develop advanced semiconductor. So our startup, they are trying to how to save the power to operate AI system. And countries, except some big countries, cannot operate this ecosystem. We need cooperate with other countries. You mentioned UAE or Saudi Arabia. So recently in the APEC summit meetings, our country, our president announced we should cooperate, and we announced AI initiatives. Recently we have a discussion about how to cooperate AI ecosystem with UAE, other countries. That means, for example, energy power or AI data system, we could cooperate with other countries, UAE or Australia. You mentioned about the power. So I think we need to, as not big countries, cooperate with in the area, in the a variety of factor with other countries.
I don't love this term middle powers, but we will talk about some middle powers such as Australia. Janet, what are your thoughts on ways that we can actually collaborate, right? We talk about cooperation a lot on AI, but a lot of this I think is very rhetoric and there's not a lot of actual follow through with policy. But what are some of your thoughts on how we can actually collaborate on this as, the rest of the world, I suppose, outside of US, China?
Yeah, I think maybe to take a step back and think about what's at stake, and we'll take the Australian context.
Yes.
So
what are we missing?
These AI models and these AI companies, and I heard a previous question to this, they're poised to automate a lot of what we take for granted as jobs today. And we're entering a period, even if AI models never get any more powerful than they are today, there's this idea of a capability overhang. There is so much more we can do with current levels of intelligence that we just haven't had time to diffuse yet. And it's only going to get more intelligent. And so we're facing a period of massive job disruption, changing economies, changing workforces. And we're poised to see a lot of the gains from this channeled into the hands of a few companies and a few countries. Well, a few companies and two countries. Mm-hmm. And I think what concerns me here is that countries like Australia, it's late in the game. These organizations have been set up, they have a lot of power. And at the moment we're at the whim of the governing powers of this future as to how the benefits are shared and what Australia's role is in there. And risking becoming an increasingly irrelevant security partner if AI's potential in national security and the future of warfare pans out too. So for me, the question is, how can you get a foot in the supply chain of AI? Because these capabilities are coming whether we want to or not. They're going to, potentially erode creative industries, whether we want them to or not. Even if we say you can't train on Australian data, they'll train on the rest of the data and they don't really need it. Our population size, our data size is not that significant in the global scheme. So I think, how can you, the US right now, you've got export controls on China and to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they license by license approach. Companies want to build out. I think if Australia can actually become a data center hub, and not just this national capability plan of we'll spend $5 billion of government dollars on building data centers and energy is important, but actually saying these companies have massive pockets. They're willing to build their own power plants. They're willing to build up. What they don't want to do is build up in a country where there are copyright restrictions that are way tighter than in the US. And with a few regulatory reforms of saying, look, yes, it's not ideal that this new technology is eroding creative industries, but can we, provide the copyright exemption that the Productivity Commission recommended? And then from there, maybe put a small levy or tax on energy use or something that goes back into feeding these creative industries and making sure they're resilient in the digital and AI age. So that's like one thing that I think could be the difference between $10 billion and $100 billion of investment into AI data centres and clean energy in Australia. And this is something that that's not quite grappled with. It's politically hard. It's a really hard narrative to sell, but this tech is coming. And do you want Australia to have a seat at the table with the US and the UK to say, hey, how can we jointly govern these things? Like, hey, we're seeing these risks arise. What are we doing about that? Or are we happy to leave this to a country and companies with very high variance policymaking at the moment? So for me, that's a real thing of like, how can you just open the doors, open the floodgates to build out for Australia? And then countries like Korea and the regions as well, like there's a lot of other work to be done. So the AI Safety Institute's like this, like the light of the AI National Capability Plan for Australia, because there's a massive underinvestment in safety and alignment research. I mentor scholars through this MATS program, also run by an Australian in the US, and they're like technically like genius young kids who are doing alignment research and make cracking breakthroughs on a handful of compute and small resources. If we have government strategy that says, hey, we're an AI Safety Institute and we're focused on this, there's a lot we could contribute into the international norms and standards that could be set. And the other thing is the robotics supply chain is currently dominated by China. And for a lot of ideas of how AI will pan out, there's this idea of continuous learning, embodied AI, having the ability to learn from data and physical realities in the world by linking up AI and robotics, et cetera. At the moment, we're mainly dependent on China. So for me, it's those areas high quality data, robotics, more edge devices, things that can be done in collaboration with other middle powers, I think are good contributions as well.
Fantastic. I mean, we're currently working on some robotics, and it's actually quite disturbing to do some research on this in the US. And most of the robotic stuff in the US is coming from Germany or parts of the EU, as well as in Japan. So even domestically in the US, robotics is very, very far behind. I want to kick it over to you, Tim, to build on what Janet has said about sort of AI safety/security, because safety is these days a dirty word in DC. What are your thoughts on that, and how do we balance sort of national trust in AI as well as AI security with taking advantage and making the most of all of these opportunities that Janet and Sunghoon has already mentioned?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of arcs. I think one of the biggest is and I think a gentleman in the audience before asked this question. I think you have to view the world, and we work with some of the most sophisticated AI companies. We've spent a long time in the space. You have to view the world that every person in the next 5 years, we even talk about this with new grads, when they leave college, they're now a manager, right? And what does that mean? It means everyone here in the next 5 years, and hopefully every Australian, is going to have a series of agents performing work for them that they don't want to do, right? Or maybe it's not that they want to do it, they just now have a team of people that they can farm it off to, right? So if you believe that that's the future, and let's hold that true for a second, what that means is whoever, one, has the most powerful models to go and execute that, that's a key ingredient, and then two, whoever has the most compute to execute from 5 to 10 agents, from 10 agents to 20 agents, from 20 agents to 100 agents, right? And so in some ways, if you look at the global population and you look at the global world ordering, whoever holds the most compute, you will now have this digital population that augments us as humans. That's the reality of where we're headed, right? And so for Australia, do we all get 10 agents? Do we get 100 agents? Do we get 1,000 agents? Do we get 1,000,000 agents? And what does that mean then for not only our output as a society, but our defense posture, our security posture, and so on. And so, it's a really interesting thought experiment, game theory experiment, that I've had with a bunch of three-letter agencies in the United States, because I'm now a dual citizen, just
Congrats.
all my family's here in Australia, just reinforcing that. But what's an interesting question to ask, and I don't think maybe many people in this room have considered it. If the US creates superintelligence, right? Once you have superintelligence, you use superintelligence to stay intelligent, right? You are on an exponential curve that just is recursionarily increasing your power. And so the challenge with that is, what if they don't share it? What does it mean for the rest of the world, right? Because there is a view, to your current point, particularly in the current administration, if you have a degree of protectionism from these, particularly from the United States, who now has by far the most powerful models in the world, by far the most talented people, is rolling out enormous amounts of capital, is trying to bring manufacturing back to the country. How do we, and I'll be very clear about Australia when I say we, how do we become an ally in that world, right? How do we say, hey, look, we're actually on this same side with you. We have been a defense partner of yours. We have I was very fortunate to get an E3 visa in the United States. That program existed because we have fought in every war that the United States has fought in, right? And so what we need to think of as a country, and this is just to answer your point, what is Australia's posture here, right? And I think the posture that I certainly would love to see for our country is to be the superpower of the oceanic region. Our friend Hwang here just said, power is a limiting factor. We are very fortunate to have a country which is the same size as the United States. The reality is a lot of it's a desert, but it doesn't mean we can't utilize that and deploy capital to create essentially a new economy for our country that is powered on compute. Because where we are headed, the world we are going to, is where all of you here and all of the people we will never meet, all of our kids and their kids, are going to walk into a world that is completely AI-driven. That is where we are headed. And it is happening, to the point in the earlier panel, it is happening on exponential curves. It is happening way faster than you could possibly imagine. And I see this from, and this will give you an illustration, in Silicon Valley today, they just launched Waymo, which is Google's autonomous cars, completely across the Bay Area. So my kids and my family get in cars now that don't have drivers. And these are everywhere. So we wake up every day now with cars driving us everywhere. And it's all powered completely from silicon and chips and models that are now navigating us. We don't use Uber anymore. It is completely gone. We get in autonomous vehicles, and this is if you view that as the most advanced section of real estate in the world, and this is how we're living. So my kids probably don't even ever need to get a license. That sounds insane, but that is the world we're headed towards. So Australia has to, I just can't emphasize enough how our role here to be a strong ally to the United States, to push forward the values that we hold dear, which I still strongly believe is democratic values that we want to fight for our kids and our future, that we have a nation to the north of us who is fundamentally autocratic and does not believe in those values, that has an enormous amount of energy, that can deploy, if their people each have 10 agents, who wins? Because in that world, there's a high probability they do, and we become irrelevant in many ways, right? And that matters a lot for our kids, that matters a lot for the future of this country. And so that's why I say, and I've said this in other talks that I've given in the United States, if you go back and watch JFK in 1962 give the speech of "We're going to the moon," it is an incredible speech, and you should go and listen to it, because he says, we don't do things because they are easy, we do them because they are hard. And I think this country needs to wake up and realize, and just to be blunt about it, the national AI policy that was released 2 days ago is not going to get us there. It is not going to get us there by a long way. And so, I flew back to be part of this dialogue to basically try to push forward the urgency that this country needs to feel, because all of you and your families and your kids, this is the world we're headed towards. And it might sound alarmist. I'm actually less worried that AI is going to kill us all, right? I think actually what it's going to do is we're not going to realize the opportunity fast enough, because what tends to happen with technology throughout history is those that jump on that curve faster realize all the capital value, and there's a banana-shaped curve. It's not that technology diffuses through society in the longest form. There's a law called Amara's law, which says we tend to underestimate technology in the short term, or overestimate in the short term, underestimate in the long term. I'm just trying to say we are here now, and we should be jumping on this train.
I hear you, Tim, but we have to pause for questions. So just before I turn over to the audience, get your questions ready. I do want to come back to Janet and Hwang Sunghoon. Sorry. So, okay, we've knocked a lot on the National AI Capability Plan. Are there any good things that have come out from it? And what is your one recommendation to the Australian government to actually, that you want to see? Just very, very quickly, and then I'm going to turn over to the audience.
Australia also has its strength, for example, energy. So I think we need to cooperate between countries, among countries. If you have a strength, Australia has a strength, and Korea has a strength. So we can come together because the big country, they make their own things, everything in a countries, but we need to cooperate between countries. So, yeah.
Look up and look out. Okay, Janet.
I'm going to double down on copyright exemptions for frontier AI model training because it's the difference between unlocking the doors for private sector to, build out massive sources of energy abundance for Australia and make sure Australia has a seat at the geopolitical table to govern how the benefits of AI and how the risks of AI are managed.
Fantastic. And Tim, I think you should run for office here.
I don't know about that, right?
Let's turn to the audience here. Do we have any questions that are coming in from the audience? We've answered all of your questions, no? I can't see anyone putting their hand up. I'm sorry, it's a... Okay, maybe... Oh, yep. Thank you for the brave gentleman here in the corner. Can you please introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, Mike Kerrigan from Palantir Technologies. Tim, completely agree with what you're saying on energy. So not wishing to just agree with you, but what are the concrete steps you would recommend to the Australian government, or whether it's government or it's private sector, to step in where government is failing, that we could take in the near term to set ourselves on that path?
Yeah, I think, so just very quickly, one of the things, and look, I don't want to knock the plan too much. The fact that there's more discussion about this is a wonderful thing. I just think some of the key ingredients are missing. One of the biggest is we need, if you look at the United States, they appointed an AI czar. You can, whatever the language you want to use, a person who has direct connection to the industry that is able to bring technology leaders in the industry directly into government, influence policy more significantly. The guy in the US is called David Sachs. He was a former entrepreneur himself. You can criticize some of the things about the gentleman, but he has done an incredible job bringing frontier labs to government. Yeah. The second thing is there is a clear sovereign AI plan and investment plan. Right? Other organizations other countries around the world, like Saudi Arabia and others, have made very clear capital commitments to energy and to data center build-outs on a sovereign level. We have not done that. The plan does not talk about that. It talks about catalyzing investment from hyperscalers, which is honestly a cop-out because the government should be figuring out. I think our superannuation fund, what's so ironic to me is if you go and look at the investment philosophy of our superannuation funds right now, they are investing in AI companies who are investing in sovereign AI infrastructure in other countries. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what are we doing? We are taking Australians' money to invest in companies who are investing in AI infrastructure in the United States. And so it's like, why aren't we being more directed on some of that capital to flow directly into our country and building out data centers and larger infrastructure and power infrastructure in this country so that we can realize the benefits from that rather than realizing it in other nations? And so, to answer your question, I think those, would be two very quick steps that we could take. The other last thing is just less regulatory tape. I think, we talked in San Francisco actually quickly about, particularly for data center build out, there's a lot of just red regulatory tape. We could create better special economic zones to be able to actually build out data centers faster. To be blunt, in the United States, these operations now are running 24/7 a day to build new data centers. The urgency is real. And I actually spoke to a very large construction organization here in this country this week, and they're telling me like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to have 3 or 4 data centers up in 27, 28. And I'm looking at them going, 27, 28? And you're talking 3 or 4 data centers? Are you kidding me? And so, everything needs to just accelerate. And so the reality is, how do you build strike teams? How do you build policy rip out? How do we move faster? That's the question. And so I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers, but I'd love to act as a catalyst to help.
Can I contrast some of that, actually?
Yes.
Because for me, the level of private sector investment dwarfs what the Australian government is likely to spend, absent of touching superannuation, which I feel like is going to be very politically tricky because people don't like AI. And so when I think about more potential paths forward, when I talk to hyperscalers who are struggling in the US, AI companies who are we've got all the chips we want, we just can't power them. Mm-hmm. Their key metric on looking where they're building out is time to power. And time to power is from the moment you break ground on for Australia, renewable, hopefully, energy project to the time you have that power connected to a data center. And I think we haven't I think a few years ago, the Australian government did this deregulation agenda where they actually went through the processes from outside of government, being like, what are all the steps we go through to make things happen? And I think we need to take that approach of saying, how can we unlock like power construction, power generation, and power to data centers faster? And even if you end up with behind the meter generation, with a view to later connect it to the grid and grid upgrades for like longer term energy abundance for all, I think that is like the key role of government here. Maybe not outlaying massive funds. Companies are willing to do that. They're willing to build the power plants. They're willing to even commit to grid upgrades. It's the get the regulations streamlined, like much more concise, expedite time to power, and then you'll attract the business.
Sunghoon, do you have anything to add?
In addition to that, I think the one point is the top talent for AI.
The what?
Talent,
yes.
Yeah, so yesterday I have some discussion with the people from the government of Australia. It's we need for Korea, we need many AI top talent, but you know the talent is moving from country to country.
Yeah.
So some big countries they have many top talent in area of AI, but some countries we need more top talent, but how to? So we attract many top talent from other countries, and we should nurture our top talent in Korea. So we are trying to make some graduate university for just nurturing AI top talent. So and we need to cooperate the talent exchange for among countries. So I need the top talent is the one point.
Fantastic. I think in addition to that also, obviously, the cultural barrier and the Australian adoption of this idea that AI is actually a good thing, that needs to shift fundamentally as well in this public education campaign that needs to come with it. I know we had a question here with this gentleman, and then we'll go to this woman here. Hotline,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, my name is Yu Li from Taiwan National Security Council. And I would like to talk about the model. Last week, the DeepSeek released another 2 models. In China, they make the model become open model and very cheap. In the US side, the model is a closed model and relatively expensive. Although from the national security point of view, we ban the DeepSeek in Taiwan for the government usage. But the public, they will buy the cheaper one.
Yeah.
So I think we need to make the awareness because the large language model actually embed your value, your culture. And right now, you use a Chinese model, actually they will for China, the outcome is from the China point of view. So I think that will become everyone's problem. So we need to face this problem. That's my comment.
Thank you for your comment. I couldn't agree more, and I think we'll get into this session later on this afternoon from my colleague Selena, actually, who's going to be on a panel to discuss open versus closed source. I think just very quickly, this conversation in the US, from what I've seen, is changing very quickly. There is a lot more momentum behind open source and so this idea of needing to compete with China and meeting them where they're at. Because at the World AI Conference this year in Shanghai, a lot of the key sort of strategy for China was to export these models as part of their push to the global south, right? And because it's cheaper, a lot of entrepreneurs are building on these models. So I fully agree with your point there. In the interest of time, unless you guys have anything, yes, go ahead, Janet.
I might just quickly add that the research around this is really interesting because if using a Chinese open source model, you can configure it so the data is not going back and forth to China. But if you tell it that you don't like the CCP, there's actually evidence that it makes you insecure code on coding tasks. There's a higher likelihood that it kind of undermines you, which is just really bizarre and points out to this idea of AI models are grown, not designed. And so it's like they do weird things. And I think China internally is starting to have to grapple with, firstly, this business model of open sourcing it all is they're able to do it because they have a hedge fund backing it. But it's starting to give rise to risks as well. And many members of the CCP and the PRC are thinking about, oh, wow, okay, these are becoming more risky to put out openly. And that's also forcing some internal conversation. So I think it's an interesting area to watch going forward.
Couldn't agree more. Yes, this woman here.
Thank you so much. I'm Vidushi, and I feel you very well put it that it's a 2-horse race. So what are the options before the global community? Do we just witness this race? Is there any way the other smaller countries which do not have compute power, energy, resources, etc., what is the role that the global community is going to play? I mean, I'm very confused. And is this the Manhattan moment? Do we need to create some kind of a global consensus and say that here are the, the regulations, these are the frameworks that you have to follow? And is there a power in the people around the world that they can come together and say that we are not going to witness this just two-horse race? We are here, it's going to impact us. It's going to impact the entire global community. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? What is the role that we are going to play? Are we going to witness this two-horse race destroying all the other smaller countries and make everything redundant?
I would push back on the premise of that question. I don't think we are going to see the rest of the world become redundant. I think there are clear losses. And I think that the global AI summits, hosted initially by the UK and then by France and then India next year, is doing something to address that question mark, right? But fundamentally, it's a zero-sum game. And I think that is something that, the panelists today have done a very good job of outlining why and the difficulties and the very real systematic barriers that exist. So thank you for your comment. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I think that might be our last question, so closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I just very quickly, I think the global community does have a huge role to play, right? Like, we want individual countries and societies to use their data and to preserve their culture moving forward. We don't want to lose that. I certainly don't want to lose the Australian way of life and of how I grew up and how my parents grew up and how their kids grew up, right? That's unique to our country, and we want to keep that. And so I think that plays a huge part in how we shape policy and how we shape the use of the infrastructure itself. I think separately, but the reality is, to your point, compute and power are what are going to redefine the world order, no question. And so I think we have to become part of that conversation in a more serious way. And I think we need to, particularly in the oceanic region at least, work with other countries to form and band together to say, look, we can be allies in this way. We can, even in the talent pool, all the researchers I know will always go to compute. Yeah. That's what they want. They want more compute because it enables them to unlock new research. And so, that's what I think that we certainly need to act as a leader, and I think we have a huge opportunity as a country to do that, at least in this region.
Thank you, Tim. Very quick last thoughts from Janet and Sunghoon.
Yeah, I think the concerns are real. I think there's reason to engage strongly in international dialogue, even though the US is not going to be governed by international consensus at this time in many ways. But the US is not a monolith. There's lots of different people to influence. I think AI could give us a future of abundance that benefits everyone. But it also could give real, abundance risks, all that stuff. But I think if folk continue to advocate, do research, do the science, say, here are the things we have to be really careful about and advocate for that, it's not always falling on deaf ears. There's a lot of opportunities to engage with different interlocutors in the system, even when some of these big powers, as a government, aren't looking to international regulations or governance.
Totally agree. Last thoughts from you, Sung?
Yes, I agree that some gap between countries, but you guys mentioned we have some international summit meeting, so they discussed how to address these issues, and some countries, including Korea, we have tried to make effort to how to assist or to support some small countries. We actually making some program to cooperate and assist some countries in the area ICT or AI. So.
Great. Optimistic about AI, guys. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to the next panel.